last in reading. And so that one is already an indicator that we are facing already a lot of learning poverty.
Yeah.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
You're listening to the RAFI Heart to Heart podcast, your space to catch inspiring real life stories of doing good told straight from the heart. My name is Liz, and welcome to today's episode. If by any chance you have not yet subscribed to this episode or to the RAFI Heart to Heart podcast, please do like and follow us for monthly heartfelt content. So, welcome to today's episode. During our last episode, we discussed the youth and in the different ways the communities can better provide support to these young people and young leaders. Today, we delve into another very important topic that concerns one of the most critical sectors in our community, the education sector. Over the last 3 years, the education sector has faced various challenges, particularly because of the pandemic. And very notably, our teachers held the fort as we ran through the last 3 years of facing the pandemic. We've had several reports on learning poverty, and the numbers have been quite alarming. Today, we'd like to talk about learning poverty and the figures that we've been facing, and talk about the realities that our young learners, teachers, and school communities are facing on the ground. And most importantly, we'd like to talk about the bright spots, things that we can do to support our learners, our teachers, and the best practices on the ground. And we'd like to challenge everyone who's listening today to do more and support our teachers and our learners. To give us more context and to talk about what's happening on the ground, I'm joined by a very lovely colleague and a good friend of mine from RAFI. We have Riza Labao, our program manager from the RAFI Education Development Unit. Hi, Riza.
Hi, Liz. I'm so happy that I'm with you for today and talk about really learning crisis and what we can do together to solve it.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Before we started the recording, we actually already talked about what we can do and the things and the realities that we're facing on the ground.
Yeah.
But just to give a little context and highlight some things now that we talked about pre-recording, and to give a little bit more insight to our listeners today. In the recent reports released by the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and the World Bank, they released a report entitled, "Where Are We on Education Recovery?" And going through that report, that's a very startling and interesting report. The report says that less than 10% of Filipino children can read simple text or comprehend a simple story, which is quite alarming. Just to put a little bit more context and clearer figures to it, the World Bank in its 2022 report on the 2022 Learning Poverty Report, they said that 9 out of 10 Filipino children aged 10 years old are unable to comprehend simple stories, which is quite alarming. When I was 10 years old, I used to love reading a lot of pocketbooks and storybooks. So hearing this story, that kind of really startled me because when I was 10, I loved reading stories. So I'm worried about young people now if they're unable to comprehend simple stories. I think locally we also see these figures on the ground, right, Reese? That we had a partial results of the early grade reading assessment studied for the school year 2022 and 2023 in Cebu, and it says that 61% of learners assessed, which is an estimate of 14,000 learners of the 23,000 students from grades 3 were found to be non-readers.
Yeah,
look
quite
at
alarming.
Dakan kay siya. So that's 14,000 of 23,000 learners of grade 3 that are unable to read.
Yeah.
Na grade 3. Grade 3 is, unsa man na siya? 9
9 years old.
9 years old. So if you're 9 years old and you're unable,
Unable to read.
that's quite challenging. And to think that at
And
this age you're
alarming.
supposed to
Read.
be able to read.
stories and all that.
Yeah. So, and that's a very complex issue. If at the foundational level you're unable to read, unsa kaha ang future no of these young learners. So today we'd like to deep into these concerns and talk more about why are we here and what can we do as a learning community. So again, we're very happy to have Riza with us. So Riz, you've been with RAFI for the last
10 years.
10 years. More kapit na mag-batchmates. For the last 10 years, and you've spent your 10 years in the education development unit, and you've spent so many years working with teachers, supporting our different teachers through our different programs. So hearing these alarming figures, what are your thoughts about like having 9 out of 10-year-old Filipino children unable to comprehend simple text and stories?
Yeah. For me, as an educator and a social development worker, this is really alarming. Like, if we were shocked and surprised with what happened to the pandemic, we must as well be shocked and be surprised, and we need really to immediately address this
Yeah.
kind of concern, because we're not just talking about the present, but really the future generation that we are dealing with. But talking about learning crisis, as you can see, this did not only start during the pandemic,
Yes,
but even
yes.
before that, right? In 2018, we were ranked as the last out of 400 plus countries that participated in PISA.
Right.
We ranked last in reading. And so that one is already an
Yeah.
indicator that we are facing already a lot of learning poverty.
Yeah.
But the close to 2 years of schools being closed really exacerbated that kind of problem that we are facing. And so, the teachers and the parents, the community really has to work hand in hand in order to solve this kind of problem, because it's also multifaceted
Yeah.
and multi-sectoral problem.
Right. And yeah, I'd like to highlight that what you said, that we already had the early warning signs early on, even pre-pandemic. And it was just really the pandemic really exacerbated these concerns. And yeah, you're right in saying that we have to do something together, and it's not really just the teachers. The teachers are doing so much.
Yeah.
You should have we've seen that
Yeah.
firsthand, how the teachers really
Yes.
worked hard in working with and for our learners and these communities. Ikaw is like for the last 10 years of working with the schools and the communities. How have they been? Like what have you seen so far in terms of these concerns and this learning crisis?
Yeah, I believe, based on my personal observation, the school was really doing so much. But it really needs to be intentional as well in terms of dealing literacy concerns. Like, a lot of our projects are really into school infrastructure, into
Right.
governance, and probably also improving on some of the learning resources that we have. But the question is, how do we ensure that these learning facilities, these learning materials would really enable effective
Right.
learning and would really lead to improvement of literacy. Because there was also a study that I've read in the past, and it says there that it doesn't mean that children in school are learning. So we
Right.
really have to be systematic, scientific in terms of really monitoring their learnings.
Right. It's not just, okay, let me place my child in school and okay, this child will learn.
Yeah.
It has to be monitored.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, like, what are your thoughts about the idea that if you have a 9-year-old child who's unable, a 10-year-old child who's unable to read at this point, what are the implications to that child's future, or what would the impact be to our community? Because I think these are Gen Alpha, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. So 20 years down the line, how would that impact their future, their immediate families, or even the economy? What would their future be like if literacy and numeracy skills are not
There,
immediately
yeah.
met?
Yeah, I would like to say and agree on what President Barack Obama had said, no, that reading is the gateway to learning.
Right.
And once a child does not know how to read, he or she could encounter a lot of learning impediments. He or she could not really understand what he or she is going through inside the class, and so you see learners being promoted but still unable to really fully grasp their lessons in the classroom. And probably I would like to share an anecdote which was also shared by one of the teacher. And this happened not in an elementary school, but in a secondary school where you would see high school students. And then there was one teacher who shared to us in one of our site visits and field validations, and who shared that there was one time they did not allow one student to enter the school because in the health declaration form the child checked all the indicators there that would tell that he or she was exposed to the virus. And so the teacher called the parent, telling the parent, we could not allow the student to enter the school because of that. And once the parent shared, how come the child did not have any exposure early on? But then the parent said, "Mom, but have you tried telling him that to check on how if he or she can read?" Because he or she does not really read, ma'am.
So did the child wasn't able to understand what
could not understand what was in the
checklist,
health declaration form, and so he just checked everything there and was not allowed to enter. So that's really the impact at present.
Right.
But could you imagine these kinds of learners now being part of the workforce?
Right.
And it's not just about the local situation, but you are also, these kids will be competing as well the other labor force across the globe. And so you have here a human resource that's not really prepared to work for the future and even be competent and competitive to work with other people across the globe.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot of catching up that needs to be done. Like at 10 years old, if you're not up to the required skill of literacy and numeracy, there's still so much work that needs to be done in making sure that the young learners are up to standard and up to speed. So there's a lot of remediation, tutorials and work to be done so that these young learners are skilled and equipped to whatever standard they're supposed to be. And that's a lot. And it's also a lot of waste in terms of investment, because there was also one study which I read, and that study was conducted by Edilberto De Jesus, the previous DepEd secretary. Yes.
And so he said that the government is actually spending more than 20,000 pesos per learner every year. And if that learner does not learn because he or she could not read, could not count, then that 20,000 would just be a waste, because the other subject matters, the other content won't be really they won't be able to grasp really. They would not be able to advance to another level if they could not read.
Right. And it's very alarming. No, I've spent a lot of time trying to read about it. One, because I'm taking in my grad school, this is what I'm focusing on. But more than anything, at that age, looking back, I know a lot of classmates, young people who were very interested in reading, learning at 10 years old. So it's I feel very reasonably disturbed over this. And more than anything, I always wonder and ask myself, what can be done? How can we make sure that we're able to support our young learners and, again, our teachers? Because one of the studies that I read and the reports that I got from the Education Development Unit is that our teachers are so overworked. They're doing so much.
Yeah.
And then more than anything, we need to support our learning community and our teachers so that we share the... what Sir Bobby always said, share the burden of their fears. And we want to make sure that we're able to journey with them. So I'm very curious to know ikaw reason for 10 years in being the with our education development unit and as a teacher. So what can we do to make sure that our teachers and our learners are supported now being faced na with this very peculiar crisis?
For one, we have to really be very intentional to really strengthen the literacy skills of our students. I would say that much had been done already by our education sector. Like the teachers, they were really very, persuasive and enduring really with all the challenges that had happened during the pandemic. But in terms of our approaches in solving this kind of problem, it's not just about really providing materials and doing these kinds of activities that we're doing routinely, but it's really more on being intentional and scientific, that we really need to measure the progress and monitor if we are really indeed progressing and if our approaches and our initiatives are really solving the concern that we intended to.
Let data speak.
Yes. And speaking of data, Miss Liz, I would say, first and foremost, we have to also be promoting data integrity. That's really one, because we could not really facilitate the improvement of these learners in terms of learning if we are not also very honest with our data, with how we present them, with how systematically we collect them and process them, because collecting is another, but processing it and reporting to it real time to ensure that we really are able to do something with the current situation is very important.
Have you seen any best practices that's being currently done?
Yeah, a lot. Some like in one DepEd division, they're already conducting what we call two subjects in one day so that students could really focus. There are also a lot of schools that are doing their remediation programs. But I would say one of the things that I get to really appreciate in terms of literacy intervention was what our partner, Reducate, has been doing. So they started actually to, move in the community-based centers initially, and providing this short but intensive method of teaching literacy. So anybody who's a literate person could teach literacy to young kids and even mature, because it started in Southern Africa, wherein their first audience was those who are in correctional facilities. But when they brought this here in the Philippines, now they are working with young children, especially in the drop-in centers or orphanages. So that's pretty much exciting.
Yeah, and we work with them right now for a project, right?
Yes, we're working with them through our project Basathon. So we've identified actually a target area from the identified districts and divisions we've noted to have high incidence of non-literates or struggling readers. We've partnered with them and conducted this project to 5 schools. We have also identified to have like a high rates of non-readers.
And you work with the teachers, or is this like with volunteers?
We work with everyone in the community. Because first and foremost, we wanted really for the Department of Education to really take part and to also see if this methodology really works in the school setup. And so thankfully, our partners from DepEd were very much interested also, and they're very welcoming to have this kind of project be implemented in 5 schools. So from there, we've had the school heads and all the teachers on board. So they've also adjusted and offered us the facilities. But what is also crucial is the engagement of our parents, as we really need their consent as well as their commitment for their children to take part in this project, which is actually a 4-month long. So it's very critical for them to be involved.
So it's 4 months. And what kind of outcomes or results do we hope to see after 4 months?
And so before we, rolled out this particular project, we have we've conducted profiling to around 420 plus learners. But actually, we selected them out from the 480 plus that were endorsed to us. Of the 420, we've noted that majority of them are actually in the lower level or
Non-readers.
zero knowledge in terms of reading. And so everyone gets to be gets to finish their book one first because the program has levels.
Right.
Everyone has to start with book one up until they get to reach book 5. The reason behind that is that we wanted to just, be sure that all the micro skills in terms of literacy are covered and they have mastered it for them to, build up and go to the next level.
This reminds me a lot of the SRA
Yeah.
handbooks that we used to do when I was still in elementary.
True. And that's good. That's true
Yeah.
because this is also self-paced and they're being grouped to, learners with the same learning
Right.
profile or learning performance that they have. So they get to also enjoy that kind of camaraderie.
Right.
And what's good is that they also have their own reading coaches.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, and we work with new teachers, fresh graduates, and those that are waiting for items
Right,
in
right.
in-depth ed. So while waiting, we get to number one, maximize their capabilities, and number two, strengthen them to
Yeah.
become also to allow them to become good reading teachers.
That's a very interesting learning community to have, and if you learn together with other 400 with your 400 colleagues, that also builds a level of support and also competition. I remember when I was still in school, for the SRA workbooks, we'd like to compete with each other, making sure that whoever gets first in completing all of these books. So I think that's also medyo competitive slide. But I think that's also where I learned how to speak English. I'm not a native English speaker because
That's good.
I'm German. So that's how I learned how to speak English. Read, speak, and write in English. So I think that is a very interesting design and model.
Yes, it's very good and very effective because one feedback that I've got also was that coming from a parent who shared that her child has a learning disability, and prior to the project, prior to the intervention, she shared that her child almost would like to give up. Because
Yeah.
competing with the rest of the class who are performers, it's too hard for him to catch up. But after the project, after 2 weeks of being in the project, he was very interested to learn, considering that he's with a group that's of the same profile
Yeah.
and the same pace as him.
Right. So it's a safer space for them to
Yes.
explore and learn together because it's not as competitive as a classroom where you have the high performing and then you also have the low performing
performing.
students. So that's
True.
a perfect way for them to learn and encourage each other. I'll pick up on something that you said, that strategic partnerships is very important and the community plays a huge role in making sure that our learners are supported. And you mentioned that it's really the parents. No, my question here is what should the role of the parents be in this learning journey for young people?
Yeah, I would say the parents should improved or develop this sense of ownership for learning. Because gone are the days where parents would just, drop the kids to school and let the parents, okay, you go to your teachers and, teachers can do everything for
Yeah.
you guys to learn. But these days, because also of our situation and the pressing need to address this, we really badly need the parents' participation. And was also a study wherein, the home is really one of the most influential social structure, right? That the child would believe in or lean on.
Yeah.
And so the parents would really have to, take a much more proactive role in terms of improving their, the literacy skills of their children.
Right.
And this can be done by, as simple as monitoring their children if they're doing their homeworks.
Right.
Or, in break time, or they would have like family time instead of looking always in the mobile phones.
Right.
Parents can have games or simple drills with their children, so that their kids would really learn literacy.
Yeah, and I think that really highlights the whole idea and notion that it really takes a village to raise a
Yes.
child. It takes a village to make sure that your children learn and grow, and learning continues at home. It actually starts
Yes.
and continues at home, and I think it's just really an added challenge, because parents also have their own realities and responsibilities. But I think what's really wonderful here is that through this program, Sabasathon, we really engage and communicate with the parents. So that's a very interesting model to have.
Yes, I'm so excited also. But I've also heard from several communities that a lot of parents have also been organizing simple tutorial sessions. Yes, and I really would like to commend these parents who really took the initiative to do these kinds of activities. Right, so it's very helpful. It's not Brigada Escuela is not only in cleaning, but Brigada Escuela can also be about reading.
Oh wow, that's a wonderful catchphrase. we should use that in school more often. So you have Basathon. You work closely with the schools, the communities. Are there any other updates or projects in the pipeline for the Education Development Unit, or things that you're currently looking out for or planning to do?
Yeah. For Education Development Unit in RAFI, our goal is really to improve the well-being of learners, to prepare them for a changing world. And one of which, the most important outcome that we're seeing is really to improve the literacy and numeracy. And Basathon is just one of the literacy interventions
Yeah.
that we're developing and implementing. So some things that we are excited also are the Race to Read, and partnering with the SRA reading laboratories to have this kind of scientific way of measuring literacy as well as numeracy. We, aside from the these kinds of interventions, we're also looking at building intentional facilities for literacy and numeracy, and that would include the learning community hubs. Some things that we're excited to share more about in the future. Yes.
I think the Education Development Unit is very busy. Since we first read that report from World Bank, you guys have been very busy developing different programs.
Because we are also reasonably disturbed.
And I think it should be that way. I think all of us should be reasonably disturbed, because if we don't support our young learners foundationally at this point, there's their future. It's a very challenging future up ahead for them. So I think all of us, if you've heard this podcast, if you've been listening to this podcast, we hope you're reasonably disturbed as we are, and challenged in the same way as we are, because we have to support our young learners.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think more than anything, reading really is, as you mentioned earlier, the gateway for learning. No? Children need to have the basics down. Numeracy, literacy really are the basics, and the foundational skills that really help children set them up for success. If children do not have the basics down, the numeracy and literacy skills, they face several challenges in the future. May this be helping them learn further, or setting them up for success, or finding themselves in better situations where they'd like to be in. And I think more than anything, it's critical that we support, be reasonably disturbed, be challenged, and find opportunities where we can help them. And more than anything, support our teachers, our learning communities, and our children, so that we're able to address these challenges, the learning poverty that we're facing right now. As you mentioned earlier, the joint efforts, the strategic partnerships really find opportunities where we're able to address these challenges, and we make sure that we are able to journey and support each other in addressing this learning poverty. We're just about to close. I think we can go on and on about learning poverty and opportunities where we're able to support each other and support our learners. Karis, is there anything that you'd like to share or highlight further, or do you have any takeaways that you'd like to share to our listeners?
My takeaway would be education isn't just about a business for the schools, but it's really a community business, and it really matters if we get to address them now,
Right,
like now, because we could not really shape the future if we would not also own our present.
Wow, that's great. We can shape the future if we own the present, and more than anything, we have to do it now.
Yes, now.
Do you have any words for our parents or our teachers out there who are listening?
For our teachers, I really salute you for all the efforts you have been doing. I know that it has been a great effort to really come across with the challenges from the last 2 to 3 years in the pandemic, and I just would like to express that you continue to build on hope, no, even if you are faced or if you're encountering like some limitations now, or some times wherein you get to see that if my children are really learning, if my students are really learning, I hope that you continue what you are doing, because you are also the hope of these children. And to these parents, build on each other, build on the teacher's capacity, trust them as well. Don't, because parents would have the tendency to also be overly protective with their children, but know that the teachers are also doing their best to do what they can in the situation that they are in. And as parents, you also have the primary responsibility to improve the literacy, numeracy, and the character of your children.
Right. Then I think special shout out as well, no, to the education department, to our dear partners from the Department of Education. They've been superstars in journeying with us and identifying solutions and implementing projects like Basathon. And shout out to the teachers. You've been like the superheroes on the ground. So thank you so much for the work that you've been doing. But yeah, I think we're just about to close. If you've been a super fan of the RAFI Heart to Heart podcast, we have a tradition here where we'd like to share our heartfelt word of the day. So what's that one word that you'd carry with you after today's conversation? So we usually have a line that goes, hi, my name is Liz, and my heartfelt word of the day is hope. So for you, Riza, what's your heartfelt word of the day?
My heartfelt word for the day is that, could it be words?
Pwede na sa words. So, mudawat na sa jumig words.
Okay. My heartfelt words for the day would be act now.
I love that. Yes. Act now. So, all right, everyone. We can, again, go on and on about talking on learning poverty, identifying solutions, and also talking about how we can best support each other. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'd actually really love to talk more about this, but we need to go. If you're still listening up until this part of the podcast, please do continue the conversation on education. Leave a comment, send us an email, or send an email to Rafi. And if you can support us, are there opportunities for them to support you?
Definitely. You could be part of our Basathon
yeah.
projects. Aside from education, we are also trying to provide for snacks for the meals, because you cannot learn without food.
Yeah, dili jud ka maka-learn kung gutom.
Yeah, food for the stomach first before food for the brain.
Yeah.
That's really, but we're looking for partners who could join us in this endeavor, as we take care for the well-being of our children through food. We will also grow them in terms of literacy. So yeah.
Yeah, so again, if you'd like to support the Basathon project of RAFI or the communities where we implement our reading remediation programs, send us an email at communicate@rafi.ph, and then let's partner. Let's find opportunities where we can support each other, or send us a message through our Facebook page at RAFI, the Ramon Aboites Foundation on Facebook. So again, let us know if you'd like this episode. Get in touch with us through our social media pages. Look for the Ramon Aboitis Foundation on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And more importantly, leave a comment down below so that we can engage, talk more about this issue, and find opportunities of collaboration. More than anything, stay tuned for the next episode as we bring more inspiring real-life stories of doing good told straight from the heart. This has been Liz for the RAFI Heart to Heart podcast. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Riza.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.